London, 1888. The city is already bleeding. Fog presses low against the streets, thick enough to swallow gaslight and footsteps alike. Every alley feels watched. Every doorway feels like a mouth waiting to close. Women walk faster now, heads down, shawls tight, knowing that death has learned how to move quietly. Newspapers scream a single name day after day, a name that has turned terror into routine: Jack the Ripper. But while the public stares east toward Whitechapel, something else is happening in the shadows. Something colder, more deliberate, and far closer to the heart of power than anyone realizes. It begins not with a scream, but with a fragment. On a damp September morning, a workman walking along the Thames near Pimlico notices something pale tangled in the mud. At first glance it looks like refuse, another piece of the river's endless filth. But when he draws closer, the shape resolves into something unmistakably human. An arm, severed cleanly at the shoulder. The skin is pale, the fingers slightly curled as if frozen mid-reach. There is no blood trail, no sign of struggle. Just a single piece of a woman, discarded as casually as waste. The police recover it quietly. London has had enough panic already. Another body part, they hope, will not ignite fresh hysteria. But the arm refuses to stay silent. Doctors examine it and note something unsettling. The cut is precise, controlled. Not the ragged work of a butcher hacking in rage, but the measured incision of someone who knows where to place a blade. Someone who understands the body. Weeks pass. Whitechapel continues to burn with fear as women are found mutilated where they fall. Crowds gather, suspects are chased, rumors multiply. The arm from the Thames slips from public attention, filed away as an unpleasant anomaly. But the killer, if killer there is, has not finished speaking. On October 2nd, 1888, construction workers digging foundations for the new Metropolitan Police headquarters at Whitehall strike something unexpected beneath the soil. Cloth. At first they assume it is debris. When they pull it free, the weight surprises them. The smell confirms their fear. Wrapped carefully in fabric is a human torso. No head, no arms, no legs, just the core of a woman's body, stripped of identity, placed beneath the future home of law enforcement itself. Scotland Yard, the symbol of British order, rising unknowingly over the remains of a murdered woman. The irony is obscene. Police rush to the scene. This time there is no keeping it quiet. News spreads like fire through dry timber. A torso buried beneath police headquarters during the Ripper murders is not coincidence. It is provocation, a message, or perhaps a joke only the killer understands. The doctors begin their work again. The torso has been washed, carefully, deliberately, blood removed, evidence erased. The skin shows no signs of decomposition consistent with long submersion, suggesting the body was kept somewhere before being disposed of. Somewhere private, somewhere controlled. The cut marks tell the same story as the arm. This is not frenzy. This is method. Victorian London has long believed that evil wears a certain face, that it prowls the slums, reeks of gin, and lashes out in desperation. But this killer does not fit that comforting narrative. Whoever did this had time, space, knowledge, and most unsettling of all, confidence. The woman herself remains a mystery, age uncertain, identity erased. No clothing recovered with her that could point to a name or a life. She is reduced in police ledgers to anatomy, measurements, observations. She becomes evidence rather than person. As days pass, more fragments surface. A leg here, a foot there. Each discovery fuels speculation. Is this Jack the Ripper escalating? Is he changing his methods? Or is London facing something even worse? The realization that while one monster stalks the streets, another works quietly in the background unseen. The police argue among themselves. The Ripper's victims were mutilated at the scene, organs removed in moments of brutal intimacy. This case is different. The body was taken elsewhere, dismembered with care, transported in parts. The killer did not need speed. He needed privacy. This places him in a dangerous category. Not a predator driven by rage or impulse, but one driven by control. And control in Victorian London is power. Whispers begin to circulate beyond the police files. Medical students, surgeons, anatomists, men who understand the body not as sacred but as structure. In an age where grave robbing for dissection is common and corpses are commodities, the line between science and savagery is thinner than anyone likes to admit. Some whisper darker things: necrophilia, the washing of the body, the careful separation of limbs, acts not of concealment but of ritual. There is no proof, only unease, but unease thrives in silence. The public, meanwhile, is told very little. Authorities fear panic, fear loss of trust, fear admitting that even the foundations of Scotland Yard are not safe. But rumors fill the gaps. Newspapers speculate wildly. Cartoonists depict a faceless killer mocking the police, burying bodies beneath their feet. Londoners begin to look inward, not just eastward. If a body can be hidden beneath Whitehall, then nowhere is sacred. Not churches, not institutions, not even the symbols meant to protect them. At night the fog feels heavier, footsteps echo longer, the river seems to watch. As winter approaches, the case stalls. No suspect, no name. The torso becomes another unresolved horror filed among many. And then, just when attention begins to drift, another discovery reignites the fear. In November 1888, near Pinchin Street, police find another torso. Again a woman, again dismembered, again anonymous. Different location, same method, same cold precision. The pattern becomes undeniable. This is not one isolated murder. This is a series. The Whitehall Mystery is no longer just a single crime. It is part of something larger, something spanning months, perhaps years. A killer, or killers, operating with patience, leaving fragments of women scattered across the city like punctuation marks in a sentence only they can read. The police face an uncomfortable truth. While they chase Jack the Ripper through alleys and lodging houses, another murderer walks free, untouched by suspicion. Perhaps better hidden, perhaps better protected by class, profession, or respectability. Victorian society clings to the belief that monsters look monstrous, but the Whitehall killer may look ordinary, educated, calm, a man who blends into drawing rooms and lecture halls, a man who understands anatomy by daylight and dismantles humanity by night. And the woman beneath Scotland Yard, whoever she was, becomes his most audacious statement. Not just a killing, but an intrusion. A violation not only of a body but of authority itself. The case file grows cold, but the fear does not. It settles into the city's bones. London learns to live with the knowledge that some killers do not announce themselves with blood-soaked streets. Some work quietly, cleanly, leaving behind questions instead of answers. And somewhere in the gaslit maze of Victorian London, a man who knows how to take a body apart continues to walk free, his secrets buried deep, waiting to surface piece by piece. The city does not forget the Whitehall torso. It pretends to, yes, wraps the horror in official silence and routine, but beneath the noise of carriage wheels and factory whistles, something has shifted. Fear has learned a new shape. It is no longer confined to dark alleys or drunken violence. It has entered institutions, professions, respectable spaces, and once fear does that, it never leaves quietly. By late 1888, London is no longer dealing with a single nightmare. It is dealing with the idea of one. The police begin to notice what the public is not meant to see: patterns. The Whitehall torso is not alone. It belongs to a grim family of crimes stretching back years, scattered along the Thames like breadcrumbs left by a mind that understands time, patience, and the value of anonymity. Doctors reviewing earlier cases reopen old files. In 1873, a woman's torso was pulled from the river near Battersea. In 1874, another appeared at Putney. In 1887, body parts surfaced again, dismissed at the time as isolated incidents. Now with Whitehall fresh in memory, those cases take on a new meaning. The cuts are similar. The disposal is similar. The victims are the same, women without names, without advocates, without recorded lives. The Thames torso murders, though the name does not yet exist, are coming into focus. What separates these killings from the Ripper's work is not just method but philosophy. Jack the Ripper kills in the open, leaving chaos behind him, forcing the city to look. The torso killer does the opposite. He removes the evidence from the moment of death. He controls the narrative by denying witnesses, denying scenes, denying even faces. The absence of heads is especially troubling. Without them, identification becomes nearly impossible. Teeth, hair, facial features all gone. The victims are erased twice, once in death and again in record. Police surgeons examine the cuts again and again. The joints are separated with confidence. Muscle groups divided cleanly. This is not the work of a laborer guessing his way through flesh. It is someone trained, or at least practiced, in human dissection. Someone familiar with anatomy not as theory but as tactile reality. This raises an unsettling possibility few want to voice aloud. In Victorian London, bodies are currency. Medical schools hunger for cadavers. Grave robbing is common. Resurrection men dig up the newly buried and sell them to anatomists for study. The Anatomy Act was meant to regulate this trade, but demand still outpaces supply. Dissection rooms exist where young men learn to cut into the dead with methodical detachment. The Whitehall killer's hands move like those of a student or surgeon, calm, efficient, unhurried. And then there is the washing. Blood is not merely cleaned away, it is deliberately removed. This is not panic-driven concealment. It suggests time spent with the body after death, time alone, time unobserved, time that raises darker questions than the police are prepared to answer. Some investigators quietly speculate about necrophilia. The idea is repulsive, dangerous, and impossible to prove. There are no witnesses, no surviving remains to confirm sexual assault, but the intimacy implied by the care taken, the washing, the handling, the separation, creates a psychological portrait that refuses to stay contained. This killer does not fear the dead, he is comfortable with them. As winter deepens, the river yields more secrets. Another limb is recovered, then another. Each discovery triggers a familiar cycle, brief public outrage, official reassurances, then silence. The police are overwhelmed. Resources are focused eastward, where the Ripper's violence continues to command headlines and political pressure. In comparison, the torso murders are inconvenient. They do not offer spectacle. They offer dread. Internally, officers argue over jurisdiction, priority, and interpretation. Some insist the same man could be responsible for both types of killings, evolving his methods. Others reject this outright. The psychological divide between the crimes is too great. One killer seeks shock, the other seeks control. Control implies planning. Planning implies stability. This is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of all. The torso killer does not appear to be spiraling. He does not escalate dramatically. He does not taunt the press with letters. He simply continues, quietly, at intervals that suggest he is fitting murder into an otherwise structured life. He may have a profession, a routine, colleagues who trust him, family who never imagine what he does when the door closes. Victorian society is built on appearances. Respectability is armor. A well-dressed man with education and composure is assumed safe by default. The Whitehall killer thrives in this assumption. At night, women vanish without sound. No cries reported. No witnesses describing struggles. This suggests the victims trust him or are rendered incapable of resisting quickly. Alcohol, drugs, or simply authority. A man who appears respectable can ask questions others cannot, can offer help, can invite someone inside. And once the door closes, the city never hears from her again. The press begins to use careful language. They avoid connecting the cases too directly, perhaps at the urging of authorities, but the public is not blind. Pamphlets circulate. Tavern talk grows darker. Some believe there are multiple killers. Others believe the police know more than they admit. Conspiracy thrives where silence lives. One particularly chilling rumor takes hold, that the Whitehall torso was not meant to be hidden at all, that it was meant to be found exactly where it was, beneath the future headquarters of the Metropolitan Police, a symbolic act, a demonstration that the killer understands systems, structures, and power. If true, this suggests not just confidence, but contempt. The killer is not running from law enforcement, he is stepping over it. As months pass, frustration grows among investigators. Without identities, there are no missing persons to connect. Many of the victims are likely poor, transient, or engaged in informal labor. Women who move through the city without paperwork, without stable addresses. When they disappear, no one files reports. No one demands answers. This anonymity is not accidental, it is selected. The Whitehall killer preys on invisibility. He chooses women who already exist at the margins, knowing their absence will not cause immediate alarm. And when their bodies are found, incomplete and unrecognizable, the system fails them again. The psychological weight of the case begins to take a toll on those investigating it. Doctors speak of the torsos as objects, perhaps to protect themselves from the implications. Police officers drink more heavily. Some refuse to discuss the case at all. London moves on because it must. But beneath the movement, the idea remains. Somewhere among them is a man who dismembers women with practiced hands and sleeps peacefully afterward. By 1889, public attention shifts. Jack the Ripper fades into legend as abruptly as he appeared. The torso murders, lacking a name or a face, sink into obscurity. Files are closed. Evidence is stored. Questions are left unanswered. But the killer does not need recognition. He has already proven what he wanted to prove. That he could take a life, dismantle it, and place it beneath the feet of authority itself, and walk away. The Whitehall Mystery is not just about what was found. It is about what was never recovered. The missing heads, the missing names, the missing accountability. And in that absence, the fear endures. Because some crimes do not end when the body is discovered. Some crimes end only when they are understood. And this one never was. By the time the last fragments surface, London has learned how to look away. The river keeps moving. Construction continues. Streets fill with new faces. The city survives by burying its nightmares beneath routine, but the Whitehall Mystery refuses to stay buried completely. It lingers in police archives, in medical journals, in whispered conversations between men who once stood over dissected flesh and knew, without proof, that they were staring at the work of a mind disturbingly close to their own. Part 3 of this story does not bring resolution. It brings the most unsettling truth of all, that some crimes are never solved not because evidence is lacking, but because the answer is too uncomfortable to accept. As the 1890s approach, investigators quietly attempt something new. If they cannot find the killer through the victims, perhaps they can find him through behavior. Profiling does not yet exist as a science, but instinct does. Experience does. And the men who have seen the bodies begin to sketch a ghost in their minds. He is likely male, likely educated, likely accustomed to blood without panic. He works with precision, not passion. He has access to private spaces where a body can be kept, washed, dismembered. He understands how long flesh can be stored before decay betrays him. He is patient. Most importantly, he does not need to rush. This eliminates the desperate, the homeless, the visibly unstable. The killer is not scrambling to hide his crimes, he is calmly managing them. That suggests income, stability, a life structured enough to absorb murder without disruption. The suspect pool grows smaller and more disturbing. Doctors, surgeons, anatomists, mortuary attendants, slaughterhouse workers with advanced skill, even police contractors, men who move between respectability and death without drawing suspicion. But Victorian society is deeply invested in protecting its professionals. Accusing a doctor is unthinkable without overwhelming proof. Medicine is sacred. Science is progress. To suggest that someone trained to heal could methodically dismantle women is to crack the foundation of trust itself. And so the theories remain theories. One recurring idea refuses to die, that the Whitehall killer may have used medical study as a mask for darker compulsions. In dissection rooms, young men are taught to suppress emotion, to view the human body as a mechanism. For most, this discipline ends at the classroom door. For one man, perhaps it did not. If the killer experienced gratification, not necessarily sexual but psychological, from control over the dead, then dismemberment becomes more than concealment. It becomes fulfillment, a ritual of dominance performed in silence. The washing of the body becomes especially significant here. It is intimate, reverent almost, not the act of someone disgusted by death but of someone engaged with it, someone unafraid to linger. This is where the case edges into its darkest territory. Necrophilia is never proven, it cannot be, but its shadow hangs over every analysis, not because evidence demands it, but because behavior suggests a comfort with the corpse that defies normal boundaries. The killer does not rush to dispose of the body. He spends time with it. Time no one can account for. The absence of heads remains one of the most chilling elements. Heads are identity, faces are memory. By removing them completely, the killer ensures the women remain forever anonymous. This is not incidental, it is intentional erasure. Some investigators believe the heads were destroyed. Others believe they were kept. Kept not as trophies in the sensational sense, but as objects of private fixation, a reminder, a possession, something that extends control beyond death. No evidence ever confirms this. No heads are recovered, no confessions surface. The question remains unanswered, locked in the killer's mind alone. As years pass, the Whitehall mystery fades into the category of historical oddities. New crimes replace old fears. New killers capture public imagination. But among criminologists and historians, the case begins to gain a different reputation, not as a failure but as a warning. The warning is simple. The most dangerous killers are not always the loudest. Jack the Ripper terrified London because he was visible. His violence was immediate, bloody, public. The Whitehall killer operated on a different frequency entirely. He understood systems. He exploited social blind spots. He chose victims who would not be missed quickly and disposed of them in ways that denied investigation momentum. He did not challenge society head-on. He moved within it. That is why he was never caught. There is no dramatic ending to this story. No arrest. No courtroom revelation. No deathbed confession. The killer simply stops, or perhaps grows old, or changes method, or leaves London altogether. History does not record his end because history never knew his name. The victims, meanwhile, remain nameless as well. Women reduced to torsos in textbooks, measurements in reports, footnotes beneath larger legends. This is perhaps the greatest cruelty of the Whitehall mystery, that it exists in the shadow of Jack the Ripper, remembered not for itself, but as an accessory to a more famous horror. Yet in many ways it is more disturbing, because it suggests not chaos but order, not madness but calculation, not desperation but patience. Modern criminology looks back at the Thames torso murders and recognizes something chillingly familiar. This is what we now call organized serial killing, the kind that avoids detection not through luck, but through design. The kind that thrives in bureaucratic gaps and social hierarchies. The Whitehall killer understood Victorian London better than London understood itself. He knew where bodies would be overlooked. He knew which deaths would not trigger manhunts. He knew that respectability is the perfect disguise. And perhaps most terrifying of all, he knew when to stop. Today, the foundations of Scotland Yard no longer hide human remains. Buildings have been rebuilt, records digitized, but the symbolism remains intact. A murdered woman once lay beneath the nerve center of British law enforcement unseen, while the city searched desperately for another monster elsewhere. That is the legacy of the Whitehall Mystery. It reminds us that evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it waits patiently, dressed in normalcy, protected by trust and routine. Sometimes it leaves no face behind, no voice, no name, only fragments. Fragments that tell us just enough to know something was terribly wrong, and never enough to make it right. The case remains unsolved because it was designed to be unsolved. And somewhere in the fog of Victorian London's past, a killer walks away forever, unpunished, unidentified, and perfectly hidden by the very society that feared him least. The unanswered nature of the Whitehall Mystery has a way of infecting everything it touches. The longer one sits with it, the clearer it becomes that this was not simply a failure of 19th century policing, but a crime that exploited the limits of human attention. London was overwhelmed. Fear was loud in one direction, and silence crept in from another. The killer understood that imbalance perfectly. In later decades, historians would return to the files with fresh eyes and modern language, trying to force conclusions where none existed. They mapped the disposal sites, measured distances, reconstructed possible routes through the city. They argued over whether the killer lived near the river or merely used it as a tool. They debated whether the crimes ended because the killer died, was imprisoned for something else, or simply learned when to stop. None of it produced certainty. What remained constant was the absence. No arrest record, no trial transcript, no photograph of a suspect. The Whitehall killer never entered legend because legend requires a face, and he took faces away. That absence creates a different kind of horror, one that feels closer and more personal. Jack the Ripper belongs to history now, mythologized and distant. The Whitehall Mystery feels unfinished, as if the door was never closed. It leaves space for the unsettling thought that killers like this are not anomalies of the past, but recurring shapes that adapt to their time. The women who died are still unknown. Their lives ended quietly, without witnesses or memorials. They did not become names shouted by newspapers or symbols used by politicians. They were reduced to parts, then reduced again to silence. In that sense, the crime succeeded far beyond the act of murder itself. The Whitehall Mystery endures because it refuses comfort. There is no villain unmasked, no order restored. Only the knowledge that someone once understood how to dismantle a human being, how to hide the evidence in plain sight, and how to disappear back into ordinary life without consequence. That is the true legacy of the case. Not gore, not shock, but the realization that the most frightening crimes are not always the ones we remember best, only the ones that were never finished, never answered, and never truly over.